A round case, 3 hands, and an understated overall design. As you can see from our channel, we believe that less is more when it comes to dress watches. And there's hardly a piece that embodies this saying more than the ultimate everyday watch, the Caliber 89 from IWC. It looks fantastic and can handle everything from the ballroom up to the battlefield. And despite its simple appearance, there are several design variations that will make any collector's heart skip a beat, from the dial, the hands, and the hour markers to the case design. We have sold a number of Caliber 89 watches over the last few years and have seen and touched almost countless different variations. It seems that with every Caliber 89 you can find an almost unique configuration. So we thought we would do our best to try and catalog the different versions that are out there. The Schaffhausen brand introduced the Caliber 89 in 1946 and produced it over 30 years until 1979. The movement was an innovative three-hand movement with center seconds and hacking seconds, meaning the second hand stop when the crown is pulled to set the time perfectly. It is a simple hand-wound caliber, but it was built like a tank. The Caliber 89 evolved from the Caliber 83, the famous movement that was fitted in so many military watches of the Second World War. Building on its military heritage, IWC designed the Caliber 89 to withstand the inevitable knocks. The wheel bolts are heavier than usual and the screws and bridges thicker. In addition, a robust spring construction has been installed to secure the central second hand against any shocks. All this contributes to the robust charm of a movement that will last a long time. So of course that's the great story. But what does all this have to do with dress watches? Well, after the launch, the war was over and the demand for military watches dropped dramatically. IWC released that they have a simple but reliable movement that was perfect for mass production. From the late 1940s through the 1960s, IWC produced many of these hybrid dress watches. If you look at the design, the various fancy lugs are probably the most striking feature of these pieces. Other common features were the size of 35 to 37 mm, the fact that they were mostly made in gold rather than steel, and had a white dial. Nevertheless, the Caliber 89 watches had some variations. Almost half of all dials had no numerals. Around a third had quarter numerals, less frequently with even numerals, and very rarely with full numerals. There's an equally wide range of different hands as well. Mostly alpha at around 50%, pointer at 30%, dauphine and leaf hands together at 20%, and hour markers with a preference for baton markers at 65% ahead of dagger with 11%, and rare arrow markers at 9%, and very rare square markers at just 8%. So if there is such a wide range of styles, the question is whether we can identify some dominant dial configurations. The IWC Caliber 89 is not typical iconic material because it comes in so many shapes and forms. There are several subclasses of Caliber 89 dress watches, which are categorized into 4 main classes depending on the spirit of the times. All have their own individual characteristics and style. For example, we see that later models in particular are often made of stainless steel rather than gold. Certain models are made of rose gold rather than yellow gold and radiate a glow that warms the heart. I'm of course talking about the sexy shark fin models from the late 1950s to early 60s. All in all, the mid-century wristwatches that IWC has developed around its magnificent hand-wound movement are anything but ordinary. They combine the reliability of a watch for trenches and first-class workmanship with timeless elegance. In other words, the ultimate everyday watch. And that is why the IWC Caliber 89 is a centerpiece. Not because of its rarity, the hype, or the shameless attempt to be different for the sake of being different. Let us now turn to the unusual lugs and their integration into the case construction. Probably one of the most influential design elements for the overall impression on the wrist. Of the examples that we have worked on at Gold Armor in recent years, we have counted at least 18 different case variants from 5 case manufacturers in the precious metal versions alone, each with slightly different designs, sizes and lug shapes. With this overwhelming variety of styles, we have tried to categorize them into 4 different categories based on the lugs: shark fin, teardrop, spider and triangular. Let's start with my absolute favorite, shark fin lugs. Shark fin lugs are definitely one of my favorite shapes. They stand out, are surprisingly unique to IWC and probably the easiest category to categorize. They are also the most prominent iterations of the 60s, the later end of the caliber 89 era. The shark fin has undergone an interesting evolution. The first example can be traced back to the early 50s with the reference 587 from 1952 to 1960 and feature a rather long fin and downward angled lugs in profile, as seen here as a long shark on the far left. The classic shark fin is the last of the 3 from 1960 to 1969 and also had the shortest and straightest fin as well as the largest diameter of 37 mm. In between, we find a transitional form with a medium fin length which was used from 1958 to 1959. It differs from the last iterations by its slightly curved wing and the narrower step of the bezel. Let's move on to the second attractive variant, teardrop lugs. In contrast to shark fin lugs, teardrop lugs are somewhat more difficult to define due to their diversity. This lug design is particularly common in earlier caliber 89 pieces. We can probably further subdivide this category into faceted and non-faceted lugs. The former include the classic teardrop, seen here on the right from 1950 to 54, and its slimmer version on the left from 1948. The faceted teardrop also comes in 2 different designs: straight in the center right from 1950 and inward facing center left seen from 1949 to 56. The latter inward facing faceted teardrop design is also better known as Bombay pendant. Now we come to the spider lugs. They are also most common in the early days of the caliber 89 in the late 40s and 50s. This temporal overlap with the teardrop lugs makes it even more difficult to draw a strict line between these 2 on a conceptual level. The general aesthetic follows the era-specific elegance of the 1940s and 50s dress watches. In the 4 styles, we see a progression from round, seen on the left, with a 2-piece case from 1947, to a central edge, center left, from 1948 to 1949, to double-faced pieces, center right, from 1950 to 56. A small outlier is the elongated spider lug, which appears in the early 1950s. The last category follows the same scheme as just described and has lugs with a square and compressed front view, triangular lugs. These shapes are also the most classic and are mainly found in models from the late 1950s. But the first glance could be deceptive because the details makes them stand out. The designs are anything but simple. As this category also summarizes the leftovers to a certain extent, the variety of styles is nevertheless dramatic. On the one hand, we have lugs that look very simple from the front, but reveal a very cool tear profile, as seen here on the left from 1948. We also have the straight look, as seen center left, produced from 1958 to 1936, and the dog leg on the far right from 1957. Both of which are classic of the time and give the case a very slim and understated profile. And last but not least, we have the ultimate oddball, the hinged case. The hinged case seen center right, which was in use from 1955 to 1959. It is a reference that is completely different from all the others. Firstly, it is not exactly triangular, but very straight. Secondly, it was one of the smallest in diameter at 35 mm. And thirdly, it has a flat bezel and rectangular case profile. Finally, to summarize and conclude, among all the different references and models and the long production period of the IWC Caliber 89, some interesting patterns and the evolution of this style over the years can be identified. Putting together all we know from the roughly 25 years of the Caliber 89 dress watch design, our 4 categories can be attributed to 3 time brackets. In the beginning, we can see very curvy lug styles that still resemble the late Art Deco to some extent. I hereby mean the spider and teardrop lug examples that cluster around the late 1940s and early 1950s. Fittingly, the tear profile lugs fall into the same time. Here you can see once again in one picture the rough development of the Caliber 89 and the case design from 1946 to 1969. After the playful Art Deco era, we observe the designs going into a more straight and subtle transition period with triangular lugs during the mid-50s to early 1960s. And finally, the IWC Caliber 89 dress watches enters a very modern, angular and quite expressive period with a shorter, sturdy and almost brutal shark fin lugs during the 1960s. When we look at these pieces through the lens of case and lug design, we not only gain insight into the decades-long use of IWC's largest and most important working calibers, but also into the Swiss watchmaking art of the 20th century. In other words, the evolution of this caliber is a perfect microcosm to understand the gradual refinement of watch design according to the tastes of the times. Over several decades, there is probably a design to suit everyone. If you're into vintage, there is an IWC Caliber 89 for you.